Welcome to Slash Bash, where today I am bringing you another pro-revenge Reddit video. In our first story, my employer stole my stuff, so I made him pay for it. Let's jump right in. I hope this won't backfire, but I believe I did not break any law, so here it goes. Sorry for the long post. Some background first. Since I was a kid, I was fascinated in computers and electronics. During school, I had no social life. I just stayed at home and was learning stuff. I was going to a generic high school that should prepare you for university without any specialization. But there were a few people with the same interests I had, and our IT teacher was really supportive of us. When I finished high school, I already had a job as a programmer and had a few years of experience in the field. I also was experienced with electronics and even worked on a few contracts for the factory in town involving creating machines for them. Other engineers came up with the idea of how the machine would work. My job was to put in the motors, sensor, wire it up, and write programs for the PLC to control it. I moved to a big city and started university, so I lost my programming job in the city. I was going looking for a part-time job while living off my parents' support. Things changed when my friend got an escape game voucher for 5 people for his birthday and took me with him. The escape game had cool magic stuff, like you placed objects in a shelf and all the pictures in the room would fall off the walls, etc. While we were there to solve puzzles, I was mostly interested in these magic things, making theories about how they made them and thinking how I would do it. When the game was over, I saw for a moment their technical room, and at this point, I was like, I want to work here. I sent them my CV, and as I was overqualified for this job, I was accepted after the first interview. I was young, naive, and stupid, so they just used me. My hourly rate after tax was approximately $8.50. To give a comparison, a cashier at a big store here makes roughly $6.50 plus benefits. The first few months were awesome. I was paid for doing my hobby and the owner loved me, as his previous tech guy, referred to as tech moron from now on, was, compared to me, just dumb. I'm not bragging, I swear. He did not come up with almost any original design. He just found something on the internet and was skilled enough to read the schematics and somewhat copy it. But he had big gaps in his knowledge. Once he told me that I can't build a battery-operated circuit that will be powered while the battery is charging, as this would cause the battery to explode. When I told him about charging regulators and how it's not an issue with his phone or laptop, he just told me I was hired to help him and to flip off. Over time, Tech Moron started to realize that I'm just smarter than him and his ego could not handle it, so he decided from now on to make my life hell. For example, the owner tasked me with replicating devices they already had in one game as he wanted to put it into another one. I spent a week just messaging Tech Moron, asking him for the schematics and source code, calling him, and he just never replied. I then decided to flip him. I came up with an improved design and built it. When I showed it to the owner at the next meeting, who was very happy with it, Tech Moron just yelled at me for not using his design and wasting time on reinventing the wheel. After some time, the owner realized what was going on and hired another tech guy, Tech Senior from now on, but he couldn't fire Tech Moron. Tech Moron had all the important source codes and designs in his laptop, and because of a bad contract, they were not the property of the escape game company. Little did we know that in the future he would never hand over most of the designs and codes, and we would end up rewriting them all from scratch. The company was also franchising. We just took a game we already had running, made an exact copy, and installed it in another location. We then provided support while they were paying us licensing fees, usually a small percentage of their profits. The owner was a typical manager who thought 9 women could deliver a baby in a month, and it showed as the company grew. Eventually, Tech Senior was made my boss as he had much more experience in electronics, while I was more oriented on the programming and the on-site support for game masters if something broke. We didn't give a flip about Tech Moron, as at this point he just showed up once a month, did almost no work, criticized all the things we did and had working, and then went home. Things were going really well, so we hired a few electronic students to help us. The building department, which was making props, like special wooden tables that we could hide our magic into, also grew. Things were looking really good until one meeting about a new franchise client. The owner told us what he needed. We, the tech guys, talked to the props guys, went over all the requirements and told him we needed 10 weeks for it. Well, it was 8, but we always accounted for crap going sideways as this date would be on the contract. The usual stuff in any healthy company. The next week, next meeting, he told us the client does not want to wait and he put 5 weeks into the contract. His reasoning was that we are doing the same stuff as before and now we have more people so it will go faster. We worked hard, like really hard. There were weeks when I just went home for 8 hours to take a shower and sleep for a bit, then went back to the workshop to work on stuff. It was hard, but we managed to finish in time, and I got some sweet money in overtime. But this was a mistake. Now we showed him that what he wanted was possible, so the next contract went over the exact same deadline crap. Or overtime, I remember having almost no social life, just working the whole week, sometimes sleeping at the workshop and being stressed as flip. Then every Friday, I just went to a pub with a few friends, got totally wasted to relieve the stress, and then slept through the whole weekend. Then came Monday and we started over. Eventually, I went from I love this job to I don't give a flip, and I wasn't the only one. Our performance dropped and we started missing deadlines. Did the owner account for it in the contracts? No. Repetition makes perfection. This time you can do it faster, was his reasoning, and he just kept signing more and more contracts, dumping the crap on us. I remember one meeting when he asked us about the status of Project D as the deadline was next week. Well, we had not even started working on this as we had our hands full with Project C, which was started later because we did not finish Project A or B in time. This is how far it went. Deposits from new contracts were used to pay the fines for old contracts. At this meeting, I realized I had just had enough. Of course, our job was not only franchising. We had our own games that needed to be maintained, and we were doing that all in the time alongside that franchising hell. The biggest issue with all the games was the control software. It was a crapload of simple-purpose scripts driving all the Raspberry Pis and Arduinos in the game, but it had one UI presented to the game master so he could control all the props in-game, override them, etc., at least in theory. But oh boy, it was buggy like hell, sometimes not working at all, sometimes you wanted to shine a light on an object to give the players a hint, but instead it opened the doors to the next level, etc. It was not universal. Simple requests required massive changes. Lots of overrides were not implemented correctly. One day, the owner finally agreed to my demands and allowed me to rewrite all of that. It took me a few months, but I created a universal engine that could handle all the crap game designers were asking us to do, was easy to expand, had error protection and recovery tasks. Now, if one prop stopped responding, you just opened the debug page and clicked restart. This was a game changer, as previously the game master had to switch off the power, and sometimes that was not possible during the game. And my biggest achievement, I created easy scripting language which was used to describe the game workflow. The game master now had a crapload of working controls and options to interrupt predefined tasks and change the flow. But that barely happened, as the game was now almost automatic and he was there just to give hints. I was not comfortable running this software on the Raspberry Pi that was there for the previous controls, and I wanted a better hardware for that. My request was always denied by the owner, but the game's manager wanted the new software working ASAP. To this point, we were always just testing it for my laptop, so I decided to lend them a few PCs. Some time ago, a friend from a big company pulled a lot of Dell Optiplex workstations from eScrapped. They were working fine, had Intel i5 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, decent onboard graphics, DisplayPort, USB 3.0, fully working computer. You could buy them refurbished for about $200. The company just had no use for them, and nobody wanted to go over selling them, so they just dumped them. I had a stack of 20 of them at home just collecting dust. I took a few of them to my work, and the boss agreed to use them, saying we would settle it later, so I just emailed him a list of all of my hardware that was being used in the games. 5 PCs, some Wi-Fi routers, old tables, some monitors, and other stuff I had collected mostly from e-waste, fixed it, and then had no use for it. Of course, I did not tell them that I got them for free and that I was expecting them to pay me for it. Fast forward, I was fed up with the franchising deadlines and got a few job offers that made me realize my real value and that I was an abused young kid in his 20s working for almost nothing. But I was waiting. By the next month, my software was deployed into all the remaining games. Tech Moron had been out of the picture for a few months now. Tech Senior had some programming knowledge and was able to use my scripting language, but had very little real understanding about the inside of the complex engine I wrote, which had now been developed for over a year. I had results, I was important, and I had demands. I scheduled a meeting with the owner where I wanted to present the list of all the problems we had and what I wanted to do about them. It all came down to one single argument. I'm not happy here, but you need me, so you will fix these issues and give me a raise or I'm leaving. And I stood my ground. A recruiter from a big IT company I wanted to work for messaged me on LinkedIn a few weeks prior. I already went on the interview, so I had an escape plan prepared. The future looked bright and I was ready to make it happen. The day of the meeting came up. I was in a good mood until there was a nasty accident in the workshop. I don't want to post any details as this would identify me in a second, but this is important. I, being the youngest one there, not even responsible for the mess, was tasked with cleaning it up. I had an argument with the workshop manager about me being a programmer, not a radioactive waste cleaning lady, but in the end, I just broke and started cleaning. Halfway through it, almost vomiting from the smell, I just snapped. None of this would happen in a decent IT company. I went to my office, packed my stuff, and just sat there, just playing games, waiting for the owner. When he showed up, I told him about all the issues. He argued at some, but when we got to the end, I just told him that today was the last straw and that I'm leaving right now. I was employed as an independent contractor so they could save some money on taxes, and my contract had nothing about my time there. I just told him that I would send him a download link of all of the files that I had, as the contract stated that they were owned by the company. He begged me to stay for one more month as they were behind on many deadlines. I just said I would think about it and left. On my way home, I called the recruiter and told him I accepted the job and could start the next month. The next day, I made a big archive of about 150 gigabytes of files, backups, etc. that I had, uploaded it to my server, and emailed the link to the owner and Tech Senior. I then spent the next 2 weeks in bed watching Netflix and ignoring calls. For the last week, I showed up to help clear up some things, hand over my projects, asked about the computers and other stuff I lent them. He told me they would pay for them, and then I left. I was lucky as hell. The next month, Corona happened, and a month later, they were forced to close all their games by the government, making their income go almost to zero overnight. This, I believe, was the reason they never paid me for my stuff, even though I repeatedly asked until I got tired of it. Time went by until a few weeks ago when I saw that Tech Senior was looking for a new job. I messaged him and we talked. He told me that they survived by doing private events for companies until they could open again a month ago. All the other tech guys except him were let go, but he managed, until he got into an argument with the owner. He did not tell me the details. The owner wanted something either impossible or as expensive as Flip. When he presented a cheap alternative, the owner just snapped and fired him on the spot. He tried to reason with him about not firing him until he could teach his successor and find a new job in the meantime, but he was fired on the spot. A week later, I got a call from the owner. He had rehired the younger tech guys he fired during COVID and wanted me to come and answer their questions, mostly about the engine I wrote. I agreed, but as we were planning the meeting, I suspected he just wanted me to do it for free. When I brought up my hourly rate, he just told me we would solve that later, hung up, and never called again. The day of the meeting came, I waited in my car outside the workshop to see if he would call me to ask where I was, but he did not. A few days later, I parked next to the warehouse where all the games were held with a Yagi antenna in my car. Surprise, surprise, the Wi-Fi routers I lent them were still there, with the password unchanged. I connected to the Wi-Fi and poked around the network. All the PCs that I lent them to run the software on were still there, still running the Linux server I installed there, and looking at the logs, they were still used to control the games. I wrote a script that runs on boot, rolls a dice, and then deleted the whole drive. I was connected to my Wi-Fi router, making changes to my computer, formatting my drives. Then I drove away. A few days ago, I got a call. Apparently, when the Monday shift came in, the control system for one of the games was not responding. The browser was showing a timeout. They decided to reset power for the whole rack where all the PCs were, multiple times, hoping it would start up, because turning it off and on always works. When they decided to stop trying, they found that all 8 games were dead. The new old tech guys figured out that the drives probably died, but they had no knowledge of my system, so they could not set it up. When I asked about Tech Senior, the owner made some excuse about him quitting and not wanting to work for them anymore. I told him I was happy to help. In the end, this used to be my dream job, but I now work for a big company. I don't have much time and it's expensive. I can come over to set it up, but my hourly rate now is $150. He talked me down to $100, which was still about twice as much as I make now. When I arrived, I checked the PCs, pulled out the email I sent him a year ago, and told him that these serial numbers match these on the labels, and told him I'm happy to find my lost stuff. I picked up the first PC and took it to my car. We had an argument. I told him that I'm either taking all that stuff back, or he is paying me something over $2,400. He wanted to call the police, but I had proof this equipment was mine. He eventually agreed and I got to work. All my software was still in the Bitbucket, even with the few modifications Tech Senior managed to make, alongside with all the config files and scripts, with the game workflow that Tech Senior was periodically modifying and backing up, so it was a pretty easy job. I got it all working and then stayed a few more hours explaining some stuff to the tech guys. I printed the invoice and I left, tired but satisfied. Yesterday, a nice sum of about $3,600 landed in my bank account. From what they told me, all 8 games were dead for 3 days. Each game costs between $80 and $120, takes 1 hour to finish, and half an hour is needed for preparation. So there are 12 slots every day, averaging $9,600 income per day when fully booked. This is, of course, just the income. Profit after paying all the rent, wages, electricity, consumables used in game, etc. is much lower, but I don't know how much. Before Corona, about 80% of slots were booked during the week and 100% during the weekends. I just like to think I made him lose $23,000, not counting the angry customers which were forced to reschedule, just because he was a jerk. If he paid me for my stuff or did not fire his only other tech guy, none of this would have happened. This is John from /Bash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and want to be the first to know when the next one drops, subscribe and click on the notifications bell so that YouTube will actually let you see my videos. We would love for you to drop a like, share it with your friends, and we will see you in the next one.